Welcome aboard. It's great to have you guys with us. First of all, I want to say thank you for all of you who are attending. I also want to say thank you to our team. So I've got a whole host of folks here from Architectural Resource. I've got Gary Cade, who's our green building colleague. I've got Kimberly Hayner, who's our social media and communication director. I've got Delaney Davis, who's running the show from the mothership. She's mission control. I've got Austin Harrell and Chloe Ferrari going to support us at the end of the event. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We've got a lot to cover. And I also want to say thank you to the folks that joined us from across the country. We have folks from New York who have registered, Illinois, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Ohio, and for the first time ever, the 2020 Insight Series goes international. We have someone who's joining us from Mexico. So it's great to have you with us. Here's a little bit of bookkeeping and kind of housekeeping for this as we're rolling through this. So this is the fourth of a 4-event series. We've had others in front of this as soon as this advances. Event 1, creating your green home, creating your beautiful home, creating your not too big home, and now your energy-free home. If you were not able to attend the earlier 2020 Insights, please go to our Architectural Resource YouTube channel. So here's what we got: 20 minutes of me sharing insights and knowledge, and then the second 20 minutes is going to be dedicated to breakout rooms for open discussion. Everyone's going to be muted during the breakout room because I can't do more than one thing at one time. And we invite you to keep your video off until you are in the breakout room. When you go into the breakout room, please turn on your video and unmute your microphone so we can answer any questions you might have. All right, hold on. Here we go. We've got a lot to get through. Let's see if we can do this together. So I want to ask you this question: how do you know when you have energy issues? Or even better, how do you know when your neighbor has energy issues? So our legal department has asked me to introduce this legal disclaimer. The images presented here have been assembled from the public domain and are intended for public consumption for educational purposes only. Any circumstantial representation of real or actual homes, perhaps looking like your home, might show up in one of these slides. It's coincidental only and not intended to inflame, incite, or otherwise offend the owner. So let's get going. So how do you know when you have energy issues? So on my way to work, after I've just driven by Dale Petty riding his bike to work, I cruise by this house every day. And if you see there at the edge of the house, what you're noticing is something called an ice dam. So they also have striated cedar siding. Those striations are seamed at 12 inches. That means that that ice dam is taller than 12 inches. That's a clue that you might be having energy issues. This is also a clue that you might have infiltration issues. This is also a clue when you climb up into your attic in the middle of winter and you're not sure which side is up and which side is down because the frost looks an awful lot like the powdery white insulation, the loose fill fiberglass. That's an indication, but how you really know is when there's not even bad weather and you're seeing things like this that resulted from what happened last winter. And the final check is, of course, your energy bills. So how do you go, where do you go, where do you start? Here's where you start. Tonight, we're going to be laying out the path to a net zero home. And it starts with CUG, conservation, utilization, and generation. And we're going to be looking at those in that order because that is the sequence. The most important thing is to make sure that you manage in this sequence. Otherwise, you're going to be throwing good money after bad. So have a brief conversation here on the fundamentals of energy so we have common ground together, all right? So temperature. Basically, temperature is vibrational kinetic energy, the motion of molecules. And what you'll hear discussed in a lot of energy conversations is something called delta T, or the difference between the temperature inside the envelope and outside the envelope. We move quickly from temperature to conversations about humidity. Humidity is the content of moisture in the air, measured in grains of moisture. There's absolute humidity and relative humidity. It's important to know the difference between these two. Temperature is how, I just went backwards. Hang on a second. There always has to be a little technical stuff going on, otherwise it's not a Zoom meeting, right? We're learning that. Heat. Heat flows because of a delta in the temperature, more to less. So I often ask this question of people, heat goes up, right? So we think about how, you know, if you're inside your house and you're on the second floor, it's the wintertime, the heat's going up. Well, heat doesn't go up, buoyant air goes up. Heat moves from more to less. And it's important to keep that in mind, because what we're talking about when we're creating a net zero energy free home is being completely on top of the heat flows through the building. It's a very, very important feature. A BTU, or a British thermal unit, is a measure of energy, and that's essentially one blue tip kitchen match. It's what it takes to move the temperature of 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. All right, so things are going to be giving me fits tonight. I'm going to just do this. Here we go. Heat has two aspects. Sensible heat, this is the apparent heat. This is how hot or cold something is to the touch. This is what you measure by a thermometer, dry bulb. But there's another aspect of heat which is very important in terms of building performance, and that's latent heat or hidden heat. This is what we think about when we have what we call phase change material. So when we have something going from a liquid to a gas, there's energy that needs to be absorbed to make that happen. The same thing happens when it goes the other direction. I want to get into a brief conversation of energy versus power. Energy is the capacity of something to do work, and energy can exist in many different forms. We're going to be talking in particular about heat energy and electrical energy. Heat energy is measured, as we mentioned earlier, in BTUs, or British thermal units. Electrical energy is measured in kilowatt hours, and that's the expenditure of 1 kilowatt across 1 hour. To get it even more confusing, power is a measure of the rate at which heat is released or work is done. So in natural gas, we look at BTUs per hour. In electricity, we look at kilowatts. Now we want to tackle about the pathways for energy that moves across the building envelope, or heat flow. There are three principal methods that we're going to be looking at. One is conduction. Conduction is a mechanical transfer of energy. It's heat flow through a material directly to another. And we look at either K, which is the conductance of heat flow, or R, which is the resistance to heat flow. So a higher R value has a higher resistance to heat flow, and that's a good thing. You can, when you make your breakfast, and if you're frying an egg, that's a perfect example of conduction. From the pan, the heat is being conducted directly into the egg, causing that to fry. The next measure of energy transfer is convection. This is the middle efficiency energy flow, and this is through fluid transfer, air and water. This is one of the things that if you're having that same egg for breakfast and now you're blowing on your coffee, you are now using convection as a way of cooling that material. And last but not least is radiation. This is the least efficient. This is heat flow in a direct line of sight through space. And in our residential concerns, there's two particular concerns that we look at, and one is solar radiation and the other is infrared radiation. So while you're busy eating those eggs and drinking your coffee, you also have a great illustration of radiation, because that's how you made your toast this morning, or if you should happen to. So breakfast is a science experiment. Who knew, right? So we're going to move now to talking about energy. So there's a conversation in this field that we're in called site versus source. And what that means is source energy is what is consumed at the power plant to generate the power that comes to your house. Site energy is the energy that's used at the site. There is a big difference. And when people talk about net zero energy, we have to discern whether they're talking about source energy or site energy. In this country, more than 2/3 of the power that we're using is lost as heat before it even gets to us. So that's like, it's like having your car derated by 30%. Another concept that we want you to understand is something called energy use intensity. And this is a way to basically make a metric that can compare any particular building at any different size. And we basically look at the BTUs per square foot per year. A typical home has an EUI of, call it 68. A passive house, which we'll talk about in the second part of this two-part series on creating an energy-free home, has an insanely low energy use index of roughly 12 and lower. So now we're going to be moving into those 3 steps that we talked about to conserve energy: conservation, utilization, and generation. And we're going to focus first tonight on conservation. We're going to pick up utilization and generation at the next event on part 2. These are the 4 aspects of this: human behavior, design, air sealing, and insulation. Human behavior, what are we talking about? This is America's weapon of mass destruction. One of our good friends, Mark Rosenbaum, who's actually one of the leading experts in energy management, is fond of saying there are no net zero homes, there are net zero households. Our behavior and how we operate in our homes has a huge amount to do with how efficient our home could be. You could have a super energy efficient home and drive it into the ground and really lose some of those efficiencies that we're baking in there. This is Imre Lovins, who's the director of the Rocky Mountain Institute. And he's got a great saying. He says the greenest, cleanest, and cheapest energy is the energy we don't have to add to the system. And that's what we're talking about in terms of human behavior. Then comes design. Design is about absolutely building as efficiently as we can. There was a study done by a University of Michigan professor who found that if you reduce the initial home size by 10% and invested the difference in cost between that home, the larger home and the smaller home, and got a 5% rate of return, you pay for the energy cost of the home forever. And what we're also looking at is optimizing the surface to volume ratio. We want to try to minimize that surface area. We also want to look at the solar orientation, because the sun energy is that free energy that we can take advantage of. Once we've done human behavior and design, we now look to air sealing. Air sealing, if you notice on that list, comes before insulation. And this is like having a parka, but having it unzipped. Like we see a lot of the students walking around campus where they got these great parkas they've got, and they're unzipped. They've got a convection energy issue going on. This is something that we call the air barrier. And this is what separates the inside of the home from the exterior of the home. Air sealing becomes super, super important. And what we look at is the 3 pressure zones of the house: the top, the bottom, and the middle. And we want to seal these things to prevent air from leaking up into the attic. Remember how we said that air moves, warm, buoyant air moves up? Well, moist air actually is more buoyant than dry air. And this is the concept that we want you to understand in terms of the neutral pressure plane. Air comes in at the bottom of the home and goes up and it exits through the top of the home. So if we want to prevent that, what we want to focus on is at the bottom of the home and at the top of the home. The bottom of the home is usually an area that we call the bond. The top of the home is what we call the lid. And then once we do those, we can move our focus into the middle. But we want to start out first with the top and the bottom. And when we're doing a high performance home, this is an example of a net zero home that was designed with Mark Rosenbaum's assistance. You can see this material that's completely enclosing the house is something called zipped sheathing. And that air control layer goes around the entire home. Basically, it's like a balloon. And then after we look at human behavior, design, and air sealing, we then, and not until then, do we look at insulation. And this is the order that we typically suggest we put our attention. We first start at the roof. Let me go back. I think I can go back. We first start at the roof, then we do the walls above grade, then we do the walls below grade, and then last, we do the windows. That's the sequence we're finding is getting good performance. In cavity insulation, there's a myriad of different things that we can use, but what we're finding is the key is not so much the cavity insulation, but the insulation that goes around the exterior, what we call the shell. This is a new concept, well, not that new, but it's taking on steam in the building science industry and building construction industry. And that's this idea of continuous insulation. These are sections taken through a wall that was done by Mark Rosenbaum in a course that he teaches called Creating Net Zero Energy Homes. I highly recommend it. It's a 10-week course. It's a very great foundational primer to what you'd like to look at. But what you're seeing here in this therm evaluation on the lower 2 slides is the added benefit of having continuous exterior insulation. On the upper left, you see 2x6 cellulose, which has a nominal R value of R20. Its actual R value is only 15.8 or 77% of the nominal R value. If you drop down to the slide directly below that, that's that same wall with 2 inches of exterior insulation, and that has a R value that's only off by 86% of its nominal value. So this idea of using continuous insulation is exactly the way to go. So we're going to focus on the roof. We're going to focus on the walls above grade. We're going to focus on the walls below grade. And then we're going to focus on the windows. That is the conservation strategy that we take. At Architectural Resource, we feel that there are 3 key steps to creating your energy-free home. And they look like this. The first step is us meeting with you and exploring what might be possible inside of your whys, what you're trying to do. The second step is to unify this into a cohesive design solution. And then the third step is to map out the how. How exactly will this happen? How does this all come together? And I'd like to have my colleague, Gary Cade, join us and say a few things, if he could, from his mileage as a builder in the high performance building realm.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Really great job on the energy efficient home tonight. Michael's asked me to share some thoughts from a builder's perspective. I've been building for close to 40 years now. And what I've noticed about us builders is we're very slow to innovate. We really like doing things the way we've always done them. And the problem with that is we end up building what I have termed BNOs. And a BNO is a brand new and obsolete home. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. Invest all that money and literally have something that's brand new and obsolete. And the future is definitely the net zero homes that Michael's been talking about. And planning is key. We have a planning pyramid. And first part is 1 hour of planning before saves 10 hours of adjusting during and 100 hours of correction after. And in the building world, you could actually put dollar signs in front of all those. And without planning, end up having a cost overrun and big time delays. So anything we want you to take away from this evening is how critical planning is. And that's something that I really appreciate about Michael and his team is how well they plan and actually plan in a way that you're actually having a home of the future today, not something you have to wait for. And certainly you don't want to be building a BNO, a brand new and obsolete home. So if you see something for yourself, we're going to have our breakout rooms coming up here shortly. Michael has generously offered a free consultation for being here attending tonight. So if that's something that you would like to take advantage of, and again, planning starts very early. You can't start too early. In fact, if you're thinking you're 3, 4, 5 years out, that's actually the perfect time to start planning. So
I always say you can never have enough time, but you can have too little time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if that's something that you want to get started, and usually the hardest part is getting started, it's a good time to take advantage of that. And we have Michael's calendar and we can schedule that time together with Michael. Thank you.
Gary, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And as Gary's mentioned, this is our passion. I mean, this is what we do at Architectural Resource. This is why we were put on the planet. It's kind of nice to know what your mission is because it makes getting up in the morning very intentional. And we're so happy at Architectural Resource because we help people imagine a home that has no utility bills. I mean, it might blow you away, but it's absolutely possible to do that. We help people imagine a home where you have this blanket of insulation and blanket of comfort, and people describe it as being womb-like, W-O-M-B, where the temperature is the same around the entire home. And we help people imagine and create homes that are based on building science. This is so exciting. I mean, I have a technical background, and it was really neat to see all the stuff that I learned in school now starting to actually come into the fore as we're becoming more and more aware of the impact that our homes are having and what we're doing together. And the truth is, you don't have to imagine this home. We can actually deliver this for you. All right, so now we're going to move into the breakout rooms, and we're going to take time to answer any questions you have, open forum discussion. And as Gary has mentioned, if you're interested, we can set up a time for me to talk with you independently, individually on your project. So thanks so much for joining in, and we'll see you in the open forum.